Losing a loved one is oftentimes the hardest parts of many people's lives. But for people like me, we have to watch our loved ones die twice. I watched my grandmother die, not in some sudden eventful tragedy or from the side of her hospital bed, but rather over the course of a year. My grandma had developed dementia, more specifically Lewy body dementia, which attacks the brain through proteins that develop on nerve cells, causing damage to multiple functions such as memory, movement, and hallucinations, causing my Grammy to lose all memory of herself and her life around her. Today, 55 million people suffer from dementia, and even more family members and friends have to suffer along as they watch helplessly from the sidelines as their loved one deteriorates in front of them. Today, I'll be talking about losing my Grammy and how that grief taught me the importance of our memory and families. As a young boy, I spent all my summer days with my cousins and brothers at my Grammy's house. But since my cousins and brother were all at least 4 years older than me, I was always treated as a baby and got special treatment from my Grammy. When we baked cupcakes, I always got to lick the spoon, and at her house, I couldn't even watch the Disney Channel because those were teenager shows, not shows for little old me. So, of course, I always had a great relationship with my Grammy growing up. She never missed any of my games or recitals, made sure I got myself into church, and taught me how to read. All things that have become huge parts of who I am today. However, this all changed once we received her diagnosis. My father had called me and my brother down from our rooms to tell us that our Grammy might start forgetting a few things. We might have to be extra patient with her, and she might even forget our names. Inside, I was terrified, but I tried to tell myself it wasn't a big deal, at least not yet. She knew who I was now and wouldn't forget about me for at least a couple months, right? And in theory, I was correct. See, according to the National Institute on Aging, dementia patients have an average life expectancy of 5 to 8 more years, which this provided me with what I felt was ample evidence to completely shrug off her condition. That was until every Thursday night at family dinners, she would show more signs that she was slowly drifting away, and dementia was winning. That's when I changed. That's when I decided to make a difference. I decided to make every last moment count. I cherish every last moment I had with my Grammy. Only I didn't. Not even a little. I got scared and shut her out. And instead of cherishing the last moments I had with my Grammy, I wasted them. As the months progressed, more and more of her brains would be attacked and eventually destroyed by the proteins, disrupting the pathways and connections her brain needed to function, reminding me time was running out. As this went on, our family decided to put her in a memory care facility to help my grandfather, whose mental health has also been affected by the situation. And I only visited her once. For months, she was locked away from her friends, family, and other people she cared about, solely forgetting who she was. And I only visited her once. Now, usually, the memory care facility would be open to guests, but due to the COVID pandemic, this was not possible. And instead of being devastated by this news, I was ecstatic. It was a perfect excuse to forget and ignore the inevitable. Now, video calls were an option, but I told myself I didn't like them because they were too impersonal, and definitely not because that first and only video call had reminded me that she had forgotten who I was. While on that one and only video call, my Grammy pointed to the screen and asked, "Who's that handsome dark fella in the back?" Now, while flattered, these 6 words had confirmed my biggest fear. In that moment, I told myself, my Grammy, the one I spent summers with and baked cupcakes with, the one that loved birds and only listened to gospel music, the one that taught me how to garden and read a book, was dead, and only Martha Harmon remained. Now, over the years, I've found out that this is a common emotion known as anticipatory grief, which is defined as the loss of a memory or experience rather than the loss of a person. So while I hadn't lost my Grammy yet, I had lost her soul. It's commonly theorized that grief comes in 5 stages. These stages being denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. Denial. I tried to ignore her problem. I did anything I could to not face what she was becoming. I claimed I had too much homework or I was too tired and needed to take a nap. Anything to not talk to her. Bargaining. Maybe if I was a better kid, or maybe if I spent more time with her, none of this would happen. Maybe none of this will happen. Anger. I was angry at the world, angry at doctors for not having a cure that affects millions of people. And, of course, depression. And no matter how hard I tried to hide it, or how often I tried to convince myself, I could never truly find peace. These emotions continued on for months while my grandma was slowly deteriorating in that memory care facility, until finally we got the call we'd been dreading since we received her diagnosis. My Grammy had only a couple days to live, and we were called inside to say our final goodbyes. By the time I got to the facility, she was already unconscious, and she had lost a lot of weight, making her look like a corpse. So while I stared at this woman who used to be my grandma, I realized that this exact fear was what I was running from all along. Nothing I could have done would have protected me from this, and shutting her out not only may have made the year leading up to her passing easier, but it sure didn't make the aftermath any easier. As a child, I've always been known as the crier. So of course it was expected I'd bawl my eyes out on that night in November. But I didn't. Devin handled it really well, they said. And I told myself the same thing. I've grown up now and don't cry. Or I'm not sad because now Martha's dead, but Grammy's been dead for months. But no matter how I tried to spin it or how I tried to justify in my head, I never quite felt right about it. Did I not care? Did I not love her? Why didn't I feel broken? Now I know that this is also a side effect of my anticipatory grief. I've been processing these emotions for months to where they felt like the new norm. But years and months later, I still find myself mourning, regretting not appreciating her more, and feeling guilty for not bawling and giving her the best months of me I could. But among my grief and sadness of her passing, I learned valuable life lessons I still hold very dear to my heart today. The first of these being a new appreciation for the mundane. I fell in love with all these boring, old memories stuck in my head, such as the names of people I knew or recognizing song lyrics. And it also instilled in me this fear of forgetting, the fear that one day I too may fall to dementia. But the bliss and appreciation that day is not today. Suddenly everything around me became so infinitely more valuable because one day, even before my death, I may lose it all. Memory, ability, family. Now, some may see this unknowable time limit we have on our minds and think it makes everything meaningless, but I argue the contrary. What makes a memory special? Is it the moment in your memory, or is it the fact that that memory can be carried with you for however long you hold on to it? Through an internal portal into your past, you can relive a moment that otherwise would have passed you by. If every moment stuck with us forever, none of them would be special. But since they don't, we get to decide what is and isn't special enough to remember. People say life is short, you need to live every moment. But this won't stop you from having your life pass you by. My grandma had lived out her whole life. She gardened, sang in her church choir, and watched the birds. But by the time she passed, she didn't know any of that. Now, does this mean her life was pointless? Of course not. The impact she left on me and others around her will last much longer than her mind or memory ever could have. She taught me more about life than anyone I know, and these are all things hopefully I'll remember. She taught me to love my life, not just the good, bad, and boring, but life itself. The fact that I can wake up tomorrow and remember what I did today, or the fact that I can look out into this crowd and recognize the faces of people I love. And lastly, and most importantly, she taught me about family. She taught me that family isn't just a name or the people you live with, but rather a connection. And that's why no matter how many times I tried to hide it, or how many times I called her Martha, she always was and still is my Grammy.